She made us laugh as Ethel Mertz. He played the grumpy but lovable Fred. But behind the scenes of I Love Lucy, Vivian Vance couldn't stand to be in the same room as William Frawley. And now, after decades of silence, the shocking truth behind their feud has finally been uncovered. Did you ever notice any tension between Fred and Ethel on screen? Comment 1 for yes, 0 for no, and let's see how many eagle-eyed fans we've got watching. Because what we're about to reveal will change the way you see this iconic sitcom forever. To begin, we have to dive into her complex personal life first. Trust me, it's related to the other relationships in her life, including with William Frawley. Keep watching, then you will understand. Complex personal life. Vivian Vance, beloved by millions for her unforgettable role as Ethel Mertz on I Love Lucy, led a personal life that was far more complicated and emotionally fraught than her cheerful on-screen presence ever revealed. Beneath the surface of television stardom and the sound of studio laughter was a woman searching, often in pain, for love, safety, and emotional peace. Her journey through 4 marriages tells a story not of scandal, but of quiet endurance. Her first 2 marriages are cloaked in relative obscurity, but what little is known suggests they were marred by a combination of personal incompatibility, the strain of a burgeoning career, and perhaps a search for stability she had never truly known. Born in Cherryvale, Kansas, and raised in an environment that was often repressive and critical, Vance carried with her deep-seated insecurities. Throughout her life, she struggled with mental health issues, including depression, which were only exacerbated by the challenges of fame, the rigorous demands of performance, and the emotional toll of relationships that never seemed to provide the sanctuary she so desperately needed. It was her 3rd marriage, however, that cast the longest shadow over her personal life. In 1941, she married actor Philip Ober, a union that would last 18 years but leave emotional scars that never fully healed. At first glance, their shared profession might have suggested a common bond, a mutual understanding of the life they had both chosen. But in reality, Ober's career never reached the heights that Vance's did, and as her star rose dramatically with I Love Lucy, the imbalance between their professional lives became a source of growing resentment. Behind closed doors, their marriage reportedly turned dark. Multiple friends and colleagues of Vance have alluded to Ober's increasingly controlling behavior, and some even claimed he was emotionally and physically abusive. While Vance never publicly detailed the extent of the turmoil she endured, those close to her suggested that her home life was often a place of fear and emotional isolation. The bright, witty, loving woman adored by audiences was, in private, a figure of quiet suffering, trapped in a marriage where her success seemed to trigger anger rather than pride. The contrast between her public image and private reality was stark. While Ethel Mertz was the ever-loyal, comedic sidekick and confidant, Vivian Vance was fighting to reclaim a sense of self in a relationship that appeared to chip away at her confidence. The emotional impact of her marriage to Ober lingered long after their divorce in 1959. Some speculate that this painful chapter left her wary of intimacy and emotionally guarded in future relationships. And yet, despite all she endured, Vance remained an incredibly strong and compassionate woman. Her ability to return to the screen with warmth and humor, even while wrestling with personal demons, speaks volumes about her character. She often said that comedy was a form of survival, and in many ways, it was. It was how she connected with the world, and perhaps how she found moments of peace in a life often marked by internal chaos. Later in life, Vance found some degree of emotional reprieve in her 4th and final marriage to literary agent John Dodds. While she remained guarded, the relationship was by many accounts more peaceful, and he supported her through her later years, including her declining health. Still, the shadows of her past, particularly the years spent with Ober, never fully left her. They lingered in her silences, in the depths behind her smile, in the moments when laughter subsided and memory crept in. Vivian Vance's final marriage and the impact of their relationship. However, a new and far more hopeful chapter opened in Vivian Vance's personal life on January 16, 1961, when she married her 4th and final husband, John Dodds. After years of emotional turbulence, heartbreak, and relationships that left her feeling unseen or even unsafe, Vance found in Dodds something she had never truly known in love: security, kindness, and unwavering companionship. John Dodds was no stranger to the world of creativity. As a respected literary agent, editor, and publisher. He brought not only intellect and refinement into Vance's life, but also a deep appreciation for the arts and for Vivian herself, not just the public figure, but the private woman behind the fame. Unlike her previous partners, Dodds was never intimidated by her success. Instead, he celebrated it, encouraged it, and stood beside her as an equal. Their relationship was reportedly built on mutual admiration, quiet strength, and a sense of emotional partnership that Vance had long yearned for but never found, until now. The two settled in Stamford, Connecticut, a serene and culturally rich town that gave Vivian a much-needed escape from the whirlwind of Hollywood. Stamford was more than a change of scenery. It was a sanctuary. There, far from the flashing cameras and studio pressures, Vance rediscovered the parts of herself that had been neglected: her love of painting, her passion for charitable work, and her joy in simple, quiet moments. In the community, she was known not just as a television star, but as a kind and generous neighbor, a woman of grace who gave back without fanfare. John Dodds, by all accounts, nurtured and protected this gentler side of her life. He provided the emotional safety she had been denied in her earlier relationships. He stood by her not because of who she was to the world, but because of who she was to him. Their home was filled with laughter, creativity, and genuine companionship, a far cry from the volatility of her past marriages. After more than a decade in Connecticut, the couple moved to California in 1974. This decision was motivated by a combination of practical and emotional needs. Vivian's health was beginning to decline, and she wished to be closer to the heart of the entertainment world and dear friends like Lucille Ball, with whom she had shared a famously complicated but ultimately enduring bond. California, particularly the quiet beauty of Belvedere in Northern California, offered her a chance to be near familiar faces while continuing to distance herself from the chaos of her earlier years. It was in Belvedere that Vivian faced some of her most difficult physical challenges. She suffered a series of strokes and was eventually diagnosed with breast cancer. Yet, through it all, Dodds never left her side. His devotion during her final years was a testament to the strength of their bond. Even as her body weakened, Vance's spirit endured, fueled in large part by the quiet love and constancy she found in John. Their marriage lasted until her death on August 17, 1979, marking the close of a life filled with contradictions, laughter and pain, applause and loneliness, glamour and grit. But if there was a silver lining in her journey, it was that she did not have to walk her final steps alone. In Dodds, she had found not just a husband, but a true companion, someone who saw her not as Ethel, not as a star, but as Vivian, brilliant, complex, wounded, and deeply worthy of love. For a woman who had spent much of her life playing a sidekick on screen and struggling with inner turmoil behind the scenes, her final marriage was a beautiful reversal. In the end, she was no longer second to anyone. She was loved, cherished, and at peace. Why she couldn't stand William Frawley. But while Vance found peace and love in her private life with John Dodds, her memories of I Love Lucy carried a different kind of weight. One marked not just by fame, but also by deep personal conflict. To the millions of viewers who tuned in to I Love Lucy every week during the 1950s, Vivian Vance and William Frawley were a comedic dream team. As Ethel and Fred Mertz, the cranky but lovable landlords and best friends to Lucy and Ricky Ricardo, they bickered with a kind of razor-sharp timing and chemistry that only seasoned performers could deliver. But behind the laughter, there was little warmth. In truth, the relationship between Vance and Frawley was marred by hostility from the very start, a toxic tension that would haunt every scene they shared. Off-screen, Vance found Frawley not just unpleasant, but intolerable, eventually referring to him, in private conversations, as the person she disliked most in her entire career. What audiences saw as comedic brilliance was often fueled by real, unresolved resentment. Their animosity began before a single scene had been filmed. When Vance first learned that William Frawley had been cast as her on-screen husband, she was reportedly appalled. A classically trained actress with years of stage work behind her, Vance saw herself as refined, poised, and professional. Frawley, on the other hand, was over 2 decades older, rough around the edges, and carried a reputation for being cantankerous and heavy-drinking. She couldn't reconcile her sense of realism, or pride, with the notion that viewers would believe Ethel was married to someone like him. She didn't hide her disapproval. Vance reportedly made comments that she was far too young and attractive to be paired with that old coot. and word quickly reached Frawley. The damage was instant and irreversible. Deeply insulted and notoriously thin-skinned, Frawley nursed that wound for the rest of his life. Their relationship became a simmering standoff, more like adversaries trapped in a lifelong performance than colleagues working toward a shared goal. As I Love Lucy catapulted into a cultural phenomenon, the dynamic only worsened. Vance's deep commitment to her work, her insistence on rehearsing thoroughly, refining, blocking, and honing comedic rhythm, clashed harshly with Frawley's more casual, old-school approach. He memorized his lines quickly, disliked reworking scenes, and had little patience for retakes. While Vance strove for perfection, Frawley simply wanted to get through the day. Complicating matters further was Frawley's reputation for drinking on the job. While he rarely missed a cue, his demeanor could shift quickly, and his gruffness became increasingly hard to manage. Vance, a professional through and through, found his behavior not only frustrating but unprofessional. She accused him, on more than one occasion, of deliberately sabotaging scenes, throwing off her timing with grumbling, ad-libs or flatline deliveries meant to drain the energy from her performance. Despite their mutual disdain, neither could walk away from the show. Both were under contract, and both recognized the importance of I Love Lucy to their careers and financial futures. So, like two skilled adversaries, they performed their parts flawlessly, masking the tension with sarcasm and wit, even if it came with clenched teeth behind the curtain. Frawley, on the other hand, was just as poisonous as it was. His disdain for Vance's snobbish demeanor was matched only by his resentment toward her for the remarks she made about his age and looks. It was stated that he routinely referred to her behind her back with disparaging nicknames, such as calling her the sack of doorknobs or that obese broad. He went so far as to include a provision in his contract that stated he would never collaborate with Vance again in the event that she ever departed the program. He remained true to his word. When Frawley learned that Vance was uncertain about continuing the collaboration, he quickly rejected the concept of CBS spinning off I Love Lucy into a new series that would focus on the Mertzes. This occurred when CBS started considering the possibility of doing so. Their animosity had reached such a poisonous level that neither of them could even conceive of spending any more time together than was absolutely necessary. Even after the program was over and they went their own ways, the animosity continued to exist between them. Later in life, when they were interviewed, both of them were reluctant to describe each other in further detail. The disgust, however, was apparent when they finally did it. According to reports, Frawley was overjoyed when he learned that Vance had been diagnosed with cancer in the late 1970s. He reportedly boasted to a friend that the elderly woman had finally received what she deserved. On the other hand, it was reported that Vance yelled, "Champagne for everyone," after Frawley passed away in 1966. In spite of the fact that this may be mythical, it highlights the profoundly ingrained animosity that exists between the two. Their quarrel has since become famous in the history of television, not only due to the fact that it was so passionate, but also due to the fact that it was so starkly contrasted with the warmth and friendship that their characters portrayed on screen. In spite of the fact that their real-life relationship was fraught with animosity, mistrust, and hostility, they were able to create one of the most legendary couples in television history. They were a master lesson in acting. When fans talk about the history of I Love Lucy, the one thing that continues to surprise them the most is the fact that Ethel and Fred Mertz couldn't tolerate each other off camera, and this continues to be the case even now. In addition, William Frawley was more than simply an unpleasant co-worker for Vivian Vance. Throughout her whole life, she had never met any person whom she detested more than he did. Tension, more tension. In 1951, when I Love Lucy began, producers thought they were pairing comedy gold. But Vivian Vance was 42 and elegant, and William Frawley was 64, rough around the edges, and an infamous Hollywood drinker. The age gap? 22 years. Vivian was horrified. "I look like I'm married to my grandfather," she reportedly snapped. The bitterness began on day one. While Lucy and Ricky were winning hearts, Fred and Ethel were dodging barbs off camera. Vivian mocked Frawley's alcoholism behind closed doors. Frawley, in turn, called her, well, let's just say unprintable names. And he had one condition in his contract. If she ever tries to leave the show, I'll go too, just to make sure she's gone. When the show ended, so did all pretenses. They never spoke again. Frawley died in 1966. Vance, when told, reportedly said, "Champagne. Anyone?" Some called it heartless, but those who knew the tension understood. Yet decades later, Vance finally opened up to a friend. He was a bitter man, but truth is, we both let ego win. A moment of regret, far too late. Love classic TV and the legends behind the laughter? Hit subscribe and ring that bell for more untold Hollywood stories every week. Ironically, the chemistry that made them household names came from real friction. Fred and Ethel's spats? They weren't acting. It was raw, real, and unforgettable. And that's the mystery of old Hollywood. Even the most beloved laughter often hides a painful truth. They shared the screen for 180 episodes, but behind the laughs lay a feud deeper than sitcom scripts ever told. Their tension impact. The vitriol between Vivian Vance and William Frawley remains one of the most infamous behind-the-scenes sagas in classic television. What makes it all the more fascinating and tragic is that their hostility was never truly resolved. There were no apologies, no reconciliations, no softening with age. Just two actors bound by circumstance, forced into an artistic marriage that neither of them wanted, and who parted ways with nothing but lingering resentment in their wake. And yet, that bitter legacy is complicated by the enduring brilliance of their work. Despite the personal animosity, Vance and Frawley created a dynamic so vivid and authentic that audiences believed in the love-hate relationship between Ethel and Fred. They laughed at their squabbles, admired their loyalty to Lucy and Ricky, and saw reflections of their own marriages in the cranky affection the Mertzes seemed to share. That illusion, that seamless performance, was the triumph of their professionalism, a testament to how deeply committed both actors were to their craft, even when it meant sharing the screen with someone they loathed. For Vance, the emotional toll of working alongside Frawley was not something she carried lightly. Though she rarely spoke about him in interviews, the few times she did, her clipped responses and icy tone made it clear. The wound had never fully healed. It was more than a clashing of personalities. It was the experience of enduring years of veiled insults, behind-the-scenes tension, and emotional exhaustion, all while delivering joy to millions. Frawley, with his coarse humor and hard edges, may have brushed it all off as showbiz banter. But for Vance, it had cut much deeper. Some of her closest friends later recalled that Vance never truly understood why their working relationship had to be so toxic. She had long since forgiven others in her life for deeper betrayals, but not Frawley. Perhaps because he represented something bigger than just a disagreeable co-star. He embodied a period in her life when she was professionally successful but personally strained, caught between the laughter she gave to audiences and the bitterness that festered backstage. And yet, Vance never let that darkness consume her public persona. She remained warm, gracious, and full of self-deprecating charm in interviews. Fans adored her. She received standing ovations at reunions. Her portrayal of Ethel became a cultural landmark. But those who knew her best recognized that behind her eyes lived a shadow of that old feud, a ghost that refused to be exorcised. Decades later, as new generations discover I Love Lucy, they are often stunned to learn that such a beloved on-screen duo harbored such animosity off-screen. It's a reminder that the magic of television is just that, magic. A constructed reality built by artists who, in their own lives, may have been weathering storms invisible to their audience. In the end, the irony of Vivian Vance and William Frawley's feud is that it helped create something timeless. The tension between them may have been real, but it was transformed, channeled through comedy, timing, and acting prowess into something that made millions laugh, decade after decade. And that, perhaps, is the strange legacy of their partnership, that hate, however bitter, was ultimately outshined by the love they brought to the screen, whether they meant to or not. A journey into the Hollywood stage. Before she became one of television's most beloved sidekicks, Vivian Vance had already carved out a deeply impressive path through the American theater scene, one built on grit, ambition, and an unwavering belief in her talent. Vivian Vance was raised in a conservative and religious household in the heartland of America. From early on, she found herself at odds with the expectations imposed upon her, particularly by her strict mother, who disapproved of her daughter's theatrical dreams. But Vivian was determined to escape the narrow confines of small-town life. She found refuge in the arts, first through music, then through drama, and quickly realized that performance was not just a hobby, but her calling. As a teenager, She moved with her family to Independence, Missouri, and later to Albuquerque, New Mexico. There, Vivian began taking acting lessons and appearing in local productions, steadily refining her craft. One of her earliest mentors, the formidable drama teacher Ava Le Gallienne, left a profound mark on her technique and discipline. Vance soaked up every opportunity to be on stage, earning a reputation in the Southwest for her powerful presence and fearless comedic instincts. Determined to break through the limitations of regional theater, she eventually set her sights on New York City, a bold move for a young woman at the time. The early 1930s were a period of struggle and perseverance. She worked odd jobs to support herself while pounding the pavement for auditions. But Vivian's tenacity paid off. Soon, she was appearing in chorus lines and understudy roles on Broadway, slowly but surely climbing the theatrical ladder. Her big break came with performances in Anything Goes and The Voice of the Turtle, where her radiant personality, vocal ability, and comedic flair earned her widespread praise. But it was her role in the 1937 musical Hooray for What, where she replaced the formidable Kay Thompson, that cemented her status as a rising star. With that production, Vance proved that she could carry major musical numbers, land punchlines with precision, and hold her own in a cast of Broadway heavyweights. Yet despite her success on stage, Hollywood remained elusive. Her early forays into film yielded only minor roles, often in B pictures or uncredited appearances. At times, she considered giving up on the idea of a film or television career altogether, believing the industry might not have space for someone who didn't fit the typical mold of a glamorous leading lady. But fate had other plans. Vivian's resilience and Broadway resume eventually caught the attention of I Love Lucy producer Jess Oppenheimer, who was searching for the perfect actress to play Lucy Ricardo's best friend. They needed someone with comedic chops, dramatic depth, and the ability to play the everywoman, real, warm, and lovable. Vance, with her sharp wit and deep reservoir of stage experience, was the ideal choice. And yet, even as her career took flight, the shadows of her early years never fully disappeared. The emotional scars from a rigid upbringing and years of professional rejection gave Vivian a complex inner life. She often struggled with depression and self-doubt, quietly carrying the weight of personal demons that belied her bubbly on-screen persona. Her accomplishment in Hooray for What established her ability to hold her own in big parts. However, her next significant appearance, in the Cole Porter musical Let's Face It, 1941, cemented her position in Broadway history. Vance portrayed Nancy Collister in the film Let's Face It, and her performance was greatly applauded. Sharing the stage alongside prominent artists such as Danny Kaye, Edith Meiser, and Eve Arden, Vance's depiction as Nancy Collister became a production highlight. The musical ran for an amazing 547 performances, which was a key milestone in her career. The success of Let's Face It cemented her reputation in Broadway circles, as she had not only proved her enormous skill, but also established herself as a dependable and capable performer in large-scale plays. While Vance's Broadway success was important to her career, she also discovered prospects in film, which she followed in the 1940s. After appearing in a production of The Cradle Will Rock in 1947, Vance relocated to California in search of fresh prospects in both theater and cinema. The West Coast offered a different type of opportunity for her career, and she desired to broaden her horizons beyond Broadway. During her stay in Los Angeles, Vance participated in 2 films, both of which showcased her adaptability to the demands of the silver screen. Vance played Leah, a streetwise chambermaid, in the 1950 film The Secret Fury, bringing a combination of ferocity and sensitivity to the character. Her performance was warmly applauded, demonstrating that her acting skills were as crisp on television as they were on stage. Similarly, in The Blue Veil, she played Alicia, a part that demonstrated her versatility as an actress. Critics praised her performances in these flicks, citing her excellent screen presence and ability to play a variety of roles. Vance was cast opposite Lucille Ball in I Love Lucy, a comedy that went on to become one of the most famous of all time. Vance's performance as Ethel Mertz, Lucy Ricardo's wisecracking, loyal, and endearingly sarcastic best friend and neighbor, demonstrated her mastery in playing the straight lady to Ball's wild antics. Her connection with Ball was unmistakable, resulting in one of television's most popular comic duos. Behind the scenes, Vance and Ball developed a convoluted yet strong bond that would endure decades. Despite their occasional disagreements, They eventually appreciated and cared for one another as co-workers and friends. Vance made history by winning the inaugural Emmy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 1954, therefore legitimizing the importance of supporting characters in television comedy. Her portrayal of Ethel Mertz was innovative in several ways, providing a strong, hilarious female character that wasn't just an accessory for the male protagonists, but a comedy force in her own right. She added empathy and relatability to the part, frequently grounding the show's most ridiculous events with her humor and tenderness. Vance's career took another turn in 1965 when she joined the cast of The Lucy Show, a television sitcom that would go on to become one of the 1960s most iconic shows. Struggle Journey. After several seasons on the program, Vance's television role helped her gain even more recognition. However, it was after her departure from the series that she sought to rekindle her cinematic career. She agreed to perform in Blake Edwards' comedy The Great Race, 1965, alongside Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon, and Natalie Wood. The picture was humorous and cheerful, in stark contrast to some of her prior, more somber appearances. Despite not being a huge blockbuster, The Great Race was somewhat successful, getting 6 Academy Award nominations. Vance considered this picture as a possible turning point in her cinematic career, believing that it would lead to other major opportunities. The film's popularity, however, did nothing to launch her cinematic career as planned, and her Hollywood dreams generally went unfulfilled. Throughout her career, Vance's work in both theater and cinema demonstrated her flexibility and dedication as an actor. Vivian Vance's career has been marked by perseverance and adaptation, from her early days on Broadway to her position in The Lucy Show and brief stint in Hollywood. Although she never rose to the kind of cinematic celebrity that some of her predecessors did, her contributions to the arts, both on stage and on screen, are fondly remembered by fans and critics. Her reputation as an actress who brought warmth, comedy, and depth to every part she played continues to reverberate throughout the entertainment industry. Battling breast cancer. The renowned American actress Vivian Vance, who was best remembered for her iconic role as Ethel Mertz on the classic television comedy I Love Lucy, passed away on August 17, 1979. She was 70 years old at the time of her death. The passing of this amazing individual marked the conclusion of a life and career that had left an unmistakable effect on the entertainment and popular culture of the United States. The illness known as metastatic breast cancer, in which cancer cells migrate from the breast to other regions of the body, such as the bones, liver, or lungs, was something that Vance had been fighting in private. Metastatic breast cancer. She maintained her bravery and resiliency in spite of her sickness, and she was supported by her close friends and family members who were by her side during the months that she was in her later stages of life. Vance had chosen to live a life that was more calm and quiet in Belvedere, California, which is a tranquil hamlet located north of San Francisco. During her later years, she had mainly withdrawn from the public limelight throughout this process. While she was there, she continued to participate in community events and the local theater for as long as her health allowed her to at the time. Despite this, she gradually became weaker as the cancer continued to grow in a catastrophic manner. In the 1970s, particularly, there were few treatment choices available for metastatic breast cancer, and the disease presented considerable physical obstacles. This was due to the fact that medical breakthroughs in oncology were still in the process of emerging. In spite of this, Vance showed an extraordinary amount of grace and dignity as she confronted the suffering and deterioration that her sickness brought her. It was the people who were closest to her, notably her husband John Dodds, who provided her with solace in the days leading up to her passing. Dodds and Vance had a close and supportive connection, and he remained her constant companion throughout her health crisis. Vance and Dodds had experienced a significant relationship. A number of her longtime acquaintances, notably Lucille Ball, who was both her co-star and a close confidant, were profoundly impacted by her sickness. Reportedly, Ball paid Vance a visit not long before she passed away, and during their time together, the two of them spoke a heartfelt farewell that highlighted the profound and enduring connection that they had developed over the course of decades of friendship and partnership. Fans of vintage television who had grown to appreciate Vivian Vance's wit, kindness, and comic genius expressed their sadness upon learning of her departure. This was especially true among those who had grown to follow her career. In addition to the fact that her depiction of Ethel Mertz had provided happiness to millions of people, her contribution to the golden age of television was universally acknowledged. Her colleagues, critics, and admirers all paid tribute to her after hearing the news of her passing. They lauded her brilliance, charity, and the lasting influence she had on the entertainment business. Vivian Vance left behind a legacy that continues to inspire performers and enchant audiences, despite the fact that her life was brutally cut short by disease. Her narrative serves as a sad reminder of both the fragility of life and the enduring power of laughter and companionship, and her work continues to be widely appreciated through repeats of the television show I Love Lucy. Who was your favorite I Love Lucy character? Fred, Ethel, Lucy, or Ricky? Drop their name in the comments and tell us why they made you smile. Like this video if you were shocked by the truth. Subscribe for more classic Hollywood revelations. Every story has a secret,